Avoidants don't chase intensity the way people think. They don't chase obsession, pursuit, or someone constantly proving love. What they're drawn to is regulation, calm energy, unbothered presence. People who don't need to pull, pressure, or constantly check whether the connection is safe. Avoidants are attracted to people whose nervous systems feel steady. Someone who can be close without demanding being close. Someone who doesn't need reassurance every time there's silence. Someone who doesn't escalate high emotions to feel secure. See, that kind of energy feels safe to an avoidant brain. Not because it's distant, but because it doesn't overwhelm their capacity. Let me run down what I mean by capacity, because a lot of anxious people don't realize that there are some people who have a low emotional capacity. And that doesn't mean they're weak, broken, or incapable of love. It means their nervous system gets overwhelmed faster than others. They feel emotions intensely, but they don't have the internal space to hold a lot of emotional input at once. So, avoidants have a low emotional threshold for sustained intensity. When emotions stay high for too long, like conflict, expectations, emotional conversations, pressure to connect when they're stressed or tired, their nervous system doesn't rise to meet it. It overloads. And when overload happens, the brain switches from connection to protection. The avoidant isn't choosing to do this. The brain is saying that's enough. It says, this is too much stress and emotions flooding. Time to shut down. The brain protects them even when they love you. Instead of getting closer to you, they become irritable, critical, distant, easily overwhelmed by things that wouldn't normally be a big deal. They can get overwhelmed by you sitting next to them breathing. This is a fact, and it's not because you said or did something, but because their system has already hit capacity limit. Once that threshold is crossed, even small emotions feel heavy, invasive, or threatening. High emotion doesn't register as intimacy to them. It registers as danger. So their body starts shutting things down. Empathy drops. Patience disappears. Communication becomes short or even defensive. And eventually, detachment feels like relief. That's why it can look like they changed overnight. But neurologically, they didn't. This was building quietly in the background, and you likely didn't see it happening because they can appear to be fine. They aren't reacting to the moment. They're reacting to accumulated emotional load. And this is where anxious partners get confused and blame themselves. They think, if I just say it better, if I calm down, if I need less, they'll come back. But the truth is, once an avoidant reaches emotional capacity, no amount of explaining or reassurance can pull them back in. Their nervous system isn't listening. It's already protecting them. They're going to see you as a part of their stress if they're not aware of themselves. This isn't about love disappearing. It's about capacity running out. This is where a lot of anxious people misunderstand what's happening. They think, if I chase harder, love harder, give more, explain more, they'll finally love me better. But for an avoidant, more emotional input doesn't equal more safety. It equals more pressure. And pressure is the fastest way to shut them down. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. Remember, they can't take too much emotion. Their nervous system learned early that closeness can become too much, too demanding, too consuming, too unpredictable. So when someone shows up calm, grounded, and emotionally self-contained, it doesn't activate that fear response. It tells their system, I don't have to brace. If you're flooding an avoidant every day with I love you, I'm here for you, I'll do anything to stay. What do I need to do? Just tell me. It doesn't land as love to their nervous system. It lands as pressure. To an avoidant, especially one with low emotional capacity, that level of emotional intensity feels like being emotionally cornered. Their brain doesn't hear reassurance or love. It hears obligation, expectation, and loss of autonomy. Even though your intention is connection, their nervous system experiences it as demand. Neurologically, this triggers emotional flooding and perceived engulfment. Their amygdala flags danger, cortisol rises, and the part of the brain responsible for empathy and problem solving starts to go offline. Once that happens, they can't respond with closeness. They respond with shutdown, irritation, distancing, or silence. It looks forced, and you're trying too hard. It may even turn them off. This behavior on the anxious side is called protest behavior. It's a survival response driven by fear of abandonment, not manipulation. The anxious nervous system is trying to restore safety by increasing connection. But for an avoidant nervous system, increased connection under stress actually creates more threat. So the more you plead, reassure, or offer yourself up emotionally, the more overwhelmed they feel, and the more they pull away. It has nothing to do with you being unlovable. It's because their system cannot process that level of emotional input without going into self-protection. This is why chasing doesn't calm an avoidant, it floods them. If you overtext long paragraphs, call, pop up unannounced at the house, or force things, that's emotional flooding, and it causes them the inability to think clearly or communicate effectively. And it's also why learning to regulate your nervous system matters more than finding the perfect words. Avoidants often stay connected to unbothered energy people for years, not because the relationship is dramatic or intense, but because it's easy on their nervous system. They don't feel like they're constantly failing. They don't feel like someone is monitoring their emotional availability. They don't feel like one wrong move will create a crisis or be blamed for hurting someone's feelings when they can't show up a certain way. Unbothered energy doesn't mean cold. It means emotionally secure. It's someone who can say, I enjoy you, but I don't need you to be happy within myself. Someone who doesn't take space personally. Someone who doesn't see their distance as rejection. Someone who lets the avoidant come toward them at their own pace. And here's the part that's hard for anxious attachers to hear. Avoidants don't chase people who chase them, because being chased feels like emotional responsibility. It feels like someone needs something from them that they don't know how to provide consistently. And that creates anxiety, not closeness. If you were to say, I love it more if you can call me every day, that sounds like pressure disguised as a preference, and to an avoidant nervous system, it still lands as a demand. Even though the words are soft, what their brain hears is, this is what you're supposed to do to keep me okay. That activates performance pressure and fear of failure. Now love feels conditional, not because you meant it that way, but because avoidants scan for expectations they might not be able to sustain long term. They will start to feel as if they can't keep you happy. That's when you'll hear that famous avoidant phrase, I can't give you what you need. Neurologically, this triggers anticipatory stress. Their mind jumps ahead to, what if I can't do this every day? Or, what happens if I miss a call? That future-based anxiety is enough to make them start pulling back before they even fail. For an avoidant, consistency requests tied to emotional safety often feel like obligation instead of desire, responsibility instead of connection, or more pressure instead of closeness. So instead of feeling closer, they feel monitored. And when they feel monitored, they pull away. When an anxious partner starts asking for more reassurance, more clarity, more communication, the avoidant doesn't think, they love me. Their nervous system thinks, I'm about to be overwhelmed, even if the requests are reasonable, even if the anxious partner isn't doing anything wrong. So the avoidant pulls back, and ironically, the more they pull back, the more anxious the partner becomes, which reinforces the avoidant's belief that closeness equals pressure. Now let's talk about why avoidants sometimes chase these unbothered people. It's not because they're playing games. It's because these people don't activate their defenses. The avoidant feels free to want them. There's no fear of being consumed, no fear of losing their perfectly structured lifestyle, no fear of emotional demand they can't meet. Avoidants want connection. They just want it without intensity. They want intimacy without obligation. They want closeness without collapse. And unbothered, emotionally regulated people provide that. But here's the important distinction. Being unbothered is not the same as being unavailable. A secure, grounded person still has boundaries. They still communicate needs. They just don't panic when those needs aren't met instantly. They don't self-abandon to keep someone close. They don't even think about shrinking themselves to avoid being too much. That's why avoidants often idealize these people. They feel safe around them. They feel respected. They feel like they can breathe. And this is where anxious attachers get stuck trying to become that person by suppressing themselves. They think, if I act unbothered, they'll choose me. So they silence their needs. They stop expressing feelings. They tolerate things that hurt them. They disconnect from themselves. That's not what avoidants are responding to. And in fact, if they sense you are choosing to shrink yourself, they will pull away for that. Some avoidants may tell you, you need to go spend more time with your family and focus on yourself. They can see you putting too much effort in them. Avoidants aren't chasing emotional numbness. They're responding to emotional stability. And those two things are not the same. When an anxious person tries to force unbothered energy while internally dysregulated, it backfires. Because the nervous system doesn't lie. The tension leaks out. The resentment builds. The anxiety eventually erupts. And the avoidant feels blindsided all over again. You can say that you're secure and that you're calm, but avoidants read energy. They may see you differently. They can still feel anxious energy. So here's the truth that matters most. Avoidants chase people who don't need them to regulate their emotions. That doesn't mean those people don't care. It means they already feel whole. They're not outsourcing safety. They're not asking the avoidant to fix their nervous system. And that's not a moral failing on the anxious side. It's a trauma response. Anxious attachers learn early that connection equals survival. Of course they seek reassurance. Of course they fear abandonment. Of course they move toward getting close when they feel distance. But avoidants learn the opposite, that closeness equals overwhelm. So they move away to feel safe. Neither is wrong, but the dynamic becomes painful when anxious people believe they have to erase themselves to be chosen. Avoidants may chase calm energy, but they don't build healthy relationships with people who disappear inside themselves. If you're anxious, the goal isn't to become unbothered, so an avoidant will chase you. The goal is to become regulated so you stop chasing people who can't meet you emotionally. Because the real shift happens when you realize this. Someone who only feels safe with you when you ask for nothing is not emotionally available. They're emotionally avoidant. And you don't need to be chased to be worthy. You don't need to be low maintenance to be loved. You don't need to stay quiet to be kept. Avoidants chase what feels safe to their nervous system. But secure love happens when both nervous systems can exist without one person shrinking and the other escaping. And that's the difference between being wanted and being able to actually be loved. If this podcast resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for listening.